If you're watching this video, I'm assuming you're interested in personality types or a life of crime. If either of those things are the case, I'd highly recommend joining our Discord server. You can find the link below in the description to this video, and I also might pin a comment with it. If you know the backstory of this channel, you'll know it came about because of me and Luann connecting online. So chatting with and connecting with people online is something I'm very interested in. I'm on the Discord server quite a lot, so if you do join, feel free to reach out to me, send me a message, and we can have a chat. Anyway, back to being a criminal. Okay, Istj. Maybe they'd be involved in organized crime, like the right-hand man or woman to some criminal mastermind, someone who makes sure the ship is afloat, whipping people into line. Maybe I should give Istjs a bit more credit here and elevate them to their most evil incarnation. That would be the law and order dictator, stamping out any opposition from those pesky Enfps and Infps. Typically though, Istjs are going to be more inclined to follow the rules and procedures and traditions. The irony being that even when being a so-called criminal, it might be more because they're enforcing unfair rules as opposed to actually breaking any of them. I can see them being pretty law-abiding, all things considered, so I'm going to put them right at the bottom in unlikely. As we're going along, if you know any real-life criminal versions of these types, please let us know down below in the comments. INFJ. INFJs can be masterful at reading people, and were they to pursue a life of crime, this would undoubtedly be the skill they turn to first. The reason they're so good with people is as much to do with their NI and TI as their FE. Their extroverted feeling is what draws them towards other people, but it's their NI and TI that analyzes them, classifies them, and figures them out. INFJs would make excellent puppet masters or Svengalis. As a result, I think they'd be well suited to being psychics and mind readers, by which I mean fake psychics and fake mind readers. So, psychics and mind readers. There are a few people that come to mind here. One is Darren Brown. Imagine that he wasn't a magician or mentalist, but was actually doing that kind of stuff in real life for his own gain. The other person is a fictional character, Patrick Jane from the show The Mentalist, who is very much the same kind of character. INFJs are very aware of their capacity for manipulation, but in general, they choose to use their powers to do good in the world for some reason. I'm going to put them in possible. ESFP next. I think ESFPs will be exponents or perpetrators of crimes of passion. It's easy to be in the heat of the moment when you're as fiery and passionate as ESFPs are. Every moment is hot. They have abundant energy, and that can sometimes spill over in situations where it isn't warranted. They're not just forceful, they're also emotional, so if their mood strikes them, their mood can strike others. A fictional character that springs to mind is Neil Caffrey from the show White Collar. He's pretty flashy and suave and charming, but also capable of being calculated and conniving. Underneath the showiness, they still know what they're doing. That third sort TE gives them a very structured mindset, and perhaps crucially, this is underrated and overlooked in them by other people. It can often look like they're floating around chaotically, but they can be underestimated as a result. In general, they're going to be on the right side of their passionate nature most of the time. I could justify putting them in likely, but I'll put them impossible. INFP next. Like the ENFPs, they're probably going to become criminals when they believe that the law itself has become unjust in some way. I can picture them being arrested for protesting some austere or unfair government policy. I wonder what a villainous or evil INFP looks like. I mean, I don't think Thanos is an INFP, but his philosophy is quite interesting. He's someone who has become, at least in the films, pretty disillusioned by humanity in general, and their, in his eyes, inability to solve or deal with certain issues. So he's taken things into his own hands. The reason I thought of him is because he seems to believe that he's doing something morally righteous. And I think that even an extremely dark, villainous, or criminal INFP might have the same underlying feeling. There'd be a sense that what they were doing was some kind of moral crusade. As always, I'm going to pick a terrible moment to show ways in which types contradict the stereotype, but I'm going to put them in possible as opposed to unlikely. So yes, that's right, I have an ESTJ below an INFP when it comes to criminality, weird as it seems. I really do think that INFPs are much more rule-breaking or law-breaking than you'd first think. ENTJ next. ENTJs might indeed encounter ample opportunities to bend or break the rules during their rise to power. Perhaps these guys are masters of the corporate crimes, cooking the books or maybe crashing economies and getting some hefty bonuses in the process. I think that a more common way in which ENTJs will be more criminal is simply by pushing boundaries too hard in situations. Like a few other types, they're excellent at spotting ways to get around systems and rules. When you add that to their desire to move quickly and get things done at a relentless pace, they might just be inclined to overstep the mark. I'm going to put them in likely for that reason. ENTJs are definitely predisposed to be successful. Their cognitive functions match up with the institutions and workplaces in society. So as they rise up through the ranks and gain more opportunities and more power, that temptation is inevitably going to come their way. Some ENTJs can be nice though, apparently. INTP next. I don't want to get too nuanced here, but one of the things about crime is that it does require you to often leave the house, unless you have a laptop or computer. If INTPs are going to turn to a life of crime, the odds are it will be online crime. I can picture them being hackers or maybe just trolls. INTPs definitely love to create systems, but this is mainly because they love to understand them. So naturally, figuring out how to circumvent systems will become very appealing. Where is the chink in the armor, the crack in the dam, the logical inconsistency overlooked by the person whose system they're breaking into? I think that a lot of INTPs are going to be interested in this kind of thing. And to be honest, they definitely have an anti-establishment vibe to them lots of the time. They believe that knowledge is power, and they can definitely be unconventional, which includes breaking rules. Surprisingly, I think I'm going to put INTPs in likely. I also heard or read once that INTPs are highly likely to be types who take drugs. If someone's also heard that, then feel free to link below to wherever I got that from. ESTP next. ESTPs are streetwise kinds of people. They're like the archetypical rags to riches people who rise up through grit and adaptability. I must say that there are plenty of crimes ESTPs are capable of, and for me that's a compliment. I think they'd make very good con men and women. They have the confidence to be convincing, and also the brain power to be conniving. Based on their functions, they might be predisposed to more opportunistic crimes, spotting moments to get in, get money, and get out. They can afford to fall back on their versatility and therefore adopt a more risk-taking mindset. Frank Abagnale, Leonardo DiCaprio's character from the film Catch Me If You Can, who's also a real person, is a good example of an ESTP criminal in my view. Someone who is remarkably audacious, yet is clearly bouncing around from one con to the next without knowing exactly where he's going with it all. I'm going to put ESTPs maybe right at the top in highly likely. ENFP next. Here's a tricky one, as always. I've mentioned before that certain portrayals of the Joker character seem like ENFPs, so I can picture them in that kind of zany troublemaker role. I can also see ENFPs getting embroiled in some dangerous adventure or a situation where they're unintentionally breaking the law. Their crimes would be of negligence of some small detail, like driving with a car full of weed in a state where it's illegal. Like INFPs, in fiction they tend to be the people who break the law when the law becomes something bad, when breaking the law itself is kind of justified. Like some archetypical hero going up against a totalitarian government. I'm going to be controversial and put them in likely. ENFJ next. When charm and crime coincide on a drunken night out, and one thing leads to another, the offspring would be a dark ENFJ with a penchant for lizard-like social schmoozing. I feel like ENFJs are going to be involved in white-collar crime, charming people out of their pants and pensions. ENFJs would be confidence tricksters of the highest order. If you look at their two extroverted functions, so their dominant FE and third slot SE, this is exceptional when it comes to reading people, but also reacting to them. One of the things that introverts might struggle with is the ever-shifting nature of human interactions. They can struggle to get a handle on them and how chaotic they can be. Having high FE and SE kind of solve this by giving them all the adaptability they need and also the energy to keep up with people and give back as much as they get. I can picture them swooning and swindling people in polite society and the political realm. They're also more than adept at being cult leaders. As you can see, there's a lot of potential for criminality in there. However, like the INFJs, they're going to be on the side of the angels most of the time. So I'll put them in possible. ENTP next. Just like the ESTPs, I think ENTPs would make and do make good con men and women, discombobulating people by dragging them into chaotic situations, ones in which the ENTP has a competitive advantage. I think the BBC Sherlock portrayal of Moriarty is an interesting example of an ENTP criminal, or just downright villain. He's a consultant criminal, which is kind of perfect for ENTPs. They can advise people with all of their schemes and wacky but brilliant ideas, then they can have other people actually carry them out and follow through with them. ENTPs are the type to mastermind the most audacious and daring crime of the century, then get caught out because they end up in court from a parking fine. ENTPs have a strong rule-breaking streak and love to find clever ways around things. That's the two sides of creativity. That ability to innovate and make things, and also the ability to innovate and break things. I have ENTPs written down as likely, but I think they justify being at the very top with ESTPs in highly likely. ISFJ next. It won't be any surprise to people to know that I think ISFJs would be low on this list. When it's a bit more obvious where a type will be placed, I naturally want to figure out where they might contradict the stereotype, or at least defy it partially. The fictional archetype of an ISFJ criminal that comes to mind is one of a person who's been wronged. Someone who experienced great injustice and is now seeking revenge. Maybe a character who is avenging the death of a loved one, or something like that. In a lot of ways, they're people who approach life in the correct way. They're happy to play by the rules and do the right thing, as long as they get the same done to them. If you cross them, well, let's just say I'd advise against doing that. Although there are going to be plenty such unfair moments in life, I don't think it's common for there to be something extreme enough for them to cross that line. I'd put them, as you might have guessed, in unlikely. Okay, ESFJ next. What does one do with all that FE when you have criminal desires? Now, ESFJs are more than capable of all sorts of crimes. Take that as my inspirational message to you. However, one that springs to mind might be blackmail. I think they'd be great at this, to be honest. Trading in the currency of information about people, having their fingers on the pulse of such things. This skill is actually applicable in many situations, including the political sphere. Again, I struggle to think of fictional or real-life versions of ESFJ criminals. When you look at their functions, they're more than capable of creative conning. Charm and social finesse will get you a long way in life. If you play it right, it can get you all the way. So they're more than capable, and maybe the fact that it's hard to think of examples could indicate that they rarely get caught. I'll put them in possible, just to honour their capacity for crime. Intj. These guys are the archetypical criminal masterminds. I'm not sure exactly where that comes from though. Their function stack definitely lends itself well to scheming. Ni and Te are the perfect combo for generating goals and then organising towards achieving them. There's nothing inherently devious about that, but like the ENTJs, I think it's the position of their feeling functions that can lead them down dark paths. Although, like I've said many times before, INTJs are much more emotional and passionate than they're given credit for. They do still have issues with FE, so they might be more likely to prioritise their own values, visions and desires to the ignorance of other people's. I think there is wisdom to the stereotype, and to honour their criminal mastermind undertones, I'm going to put them not at the top, but just underneath in likely. ISFP next. I think I joked in the past that ISFPs, were they to turn extremely dark, might be serial killers who have very aesthetically pleasing crime scenes. That might be on the unlikely side of things though. Like the ESFPs, their passions can definitely spill over at times, since they are people who are prone to intense emotions and fieriness. They can also be a bit like ENFPs in their capacity to not realise they're even breaking rules or laws. So there's criminal potential here. I feel the archetype of the tortured artist applied to ISFPs. I'm not sure whether this translates into any kind of crime, but I can certainly see a destructive streak hidden in there. Can I put them as high as likely? Probably not. I put them in possible. ISTJ next. What does an ISTJ criminal look like? Maybe it's like the guy from the Shawshank Redemption, who is technically innocent, but very methodically and painstakingly develops a way to break out of jail. Or maybe someone who concocts a plan to swindle the company they've worked for all their life and leave money to their families as inheritance. It's kind of difficult to imagine what an archetypical ISTJ criminal would look like, to be honest. Let me know down in the comments below whether you guys can think of any good examples, whether you can imagine any, or whether you just know some. I'm going to put them in unlikely. ISTP, finally. Dare I invoke the word assassin? If an ISTP is going to be a criminal, they're going to make use of their capacity to master skills. They're the archetypical sell sword or gun for hire. Someone who is there to do a job, even if that job is a hit job. It's like if they simply turned off their extroverted feeling and became pure technicians whose trade is crime. James Bond is often portrayed or thought of as an archetypical ISTP character. Obviously he's been played many times, and that means the type varies slightly, but the essence of the character is an ISTP. When you think about his role, it's one of getting a mission and nailing it. He's not so concerned with the bigger picture, why these missions might be being done, what the political agendas are. He's just taking the opportunity to operate his skill set at a high level in the moment without ever overcomplicating things. At their extreme, they'll be contract killers, but maybe a more chilled out version would simply be an opportunistic lockpicker. I'm going to put them in likely. Sometimes these videos get many more views than we have subscribers. That either means that people hate the videos or they forgot to subscribe. I mean, there's really no other option. Please feel free to like and subscribe and comment below, and I'd highly recommend, like I said at the beginning, joining our Discord server and reaching out to me when you do.